Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment responds to China's use of economic warfare against our allies and partners. Economic warfare is one of Beijing's most effective and feared weapons. As the world's second largest economy, the PRC has an enormous market. It's also the top bilateral trading partner for most, if not all, of its neighbors and many other countries across the globe. This gives China tremendous leverage. This leverage has mostly kept the world in line. Beijing's economic clout usually allows it to get what it wants, including acceptance of its point of view. The Europeans, until this year at least, really seemed to think China wasn't so bad. The Muslim world is silent on the Uyghurs. South China Sea littoral states fear speaking too loudly or being made to choose between the United States and China. And here in the United States, cheerleaders for engagement fueled by China-connected corporate profits that they get out of the China market have argued strenuously against any serious attempt to hold the PRC to account. All these countries, and the U.S. to some degree, fear Beijing's retaliation, and they have good reason to. What Beijing threatens to do is wage a concerted economic campaign against anyone who would dare call it out for its treatment of the Uyghurs, its cover-up of COVID-19, its territorial expansion of the South China Sea, or its threats to annex Taiwan, or on and on. Australia is the clearest example recently. It's an example Beijing wants everyone to see and take notice of. As Australia attempted to root out undue PRC influence in its politics and then called for an investigation in the origins of COVID-19, the pandemic, Beijing retaliated with increasing economic punishment, curbing its imports of Australian lobster, beef, barley, wine, coal, and other products. To its credit, Australia stood firm in the face of such bullying. But unfortunately, Australia's courage is not widespread. Too many nations fear offending or angering the PRC, allowing Beijing to establish a new form of empire, one where others pull the strings on their behalf out of fear for their livelihoods. Beijing's threat of economic blackmail has kept much of the world on the sidelines in the strategic competition that will define this century. Those avoiding the conflict hope not to be forced to choose between the U.S. and China, hoping that freedom will be free. Countries that should be allies are suddenly silent as we're trying to enlist the free world to counter the PRC. This needs to end. That's why I'm proposing an amendment which is designed to develop a strategy to counter Beijing's efforts to employ its economic leverage. Our allies and partners need to know that the United States will lead the effort to answer the PRC's aggressive actions around the globe and will support and defend them when they're willing to stand up to Beijing. By providing these assurances, we will embolden more nations to take the steps necessary to counter the PRC's master plan to emerge as the world's dominant economic power and build a global economy centered on Beijing. Congress, however, is not the appropriate venue for coming up with a counter-campaign. Campaigns are by their nature a dynamic attempt to match means with ends. A tailored mix of carrots and sticks is necessary. That's why this amendment tasks the President with coming up with a whole-of-government strategy to respond to Beijing's economic warfare. Only by employing all our economic means and other components of national power will we be able to relieve countries of the fear that they will suffer undue economic harm if they merely assert their own interests against Beijing. I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle this time to support this amendment, and I yield back.